Great to be with you. It's always a treat to be with the Farmers Union and with producers to talk about issues and how I can be a leader in Congress on these topics. So thanks for the invitation. Thanks for all the work you guys do, and thanks to all the farmers and ranchers and people in the food production industry that are watching today. For those of you that don't know me, I'm the daughter of a World War II veteran. My mother was from Blue Jacket, Oklahoma. She left there at age 18 to go west and worked for the Navy. The two of them met on the West Coast, and the result was 4 girls. I'm the youngest. And really, you know, I was raised with the values of hard work and commitment to community and making your own way, like my mom did. I've worked those values into my career, which has been 37 years in natural resources planning and policy. My specialty is in water. So many of you on this call today, I may have worked with to protect your senior water rights, or you may have known about my work on water compacts and the Blackfoot Drought Response Plan, and really finding win-win-win solutions through bringing very diverse interests together on really thorny issues. When you work in water, it's boy, people bring their firearms to those meetings. So I'm proud of the many creative solutions that have both benefited producers and irrigators and other water users, but also ensured that we still have you know, the last best place here. So let's see. I'm a 3-term state legislator. Took that sort of problem-solving, collaborative approach to the legislature and got some good legislation passed. That one of them was to created over 200 new businesses and over 3,000 new Montana products, and a lot of those products use Montana ag inputs in their production. So I'm all about value added, and I know we're going to talk about that further. But I'm looking to take those skills and commitment to Congress and get out of this hyper-partisan gridlock and turn things around and start getting Congress to work again for Montana and the nation. So that's some background. I wasn't told what timeframes we've got here, but I want to make sure you guys have enough time to ask your questions and then get out and move cattle or whatever you're going to be doing today. So, and Walt, is there going to be any opportunity for the audience to ask questions, or just the panelists?
Yes, if anyone from the audience has questions, please put it in the chat box and we'll get them asked.
Great.
So first I want to introduce Kim Mangold, who is our government affairs person. And then Lindsay, who was on just a second ago, she's our communications director. And then everyone else can introduce themselves as they ask the questions. There's Lindsay. So, you know, last week I was out visiting a neighbor who was harvesting his hemp crop. And it was, you know, checking it all out. And he started driving back to the field and his combine stopped suddenly. And he jumped out and he says, you know, this combine, it's been giving me fits all harvest. And the dealer told me I needed to call him when it stopped. And it's, most of us farmers, we like to fix our own equipment. And but because of these manufacturers refuse to share their technology so that we can troubleshoot our own equipment, we have to call a dealer to come out and fix our equipment. Now, what's really frustrating about this is that, you know, the China trade war was mostly about protecting intellectual property. So we lost our markets that we've spent 4 or 5 decades developing so that these manufacturers can refuse us the right to repair our own equipment. What can you do to help us?
Well, thank you for that question. And one of the reasons I love these forums is often it gives me a reason to learn about an issue that otherwise, hadn't crossed my plate yet. So, what I've found is that right to repair laws are gaining in popularity, especially with personal electronics. People are pretty peeved that even the screws in an iPhone are you can't even buy them on the regular market. So a 1975 act made it illegal for companies to void a warranty just because someone repaired or modified something themselves. That's sort of the first, I think, step in this movement. I don't know if that's enforced, but it's a step. And then there's an automotive right to repair law that passed in Massachusetts in 2012. And it requires the same diagnostic and repair information and tools made available to dealers to be made available for purchase by vehicle owners in that case, and independent repair shops. So that led to a national agreement with the auto industry in 2014. And according to online information, the US Copyright Office has concluded that companies can't block access to repair information under copyright law, but the way companies do it are under contracts or end user license agreements, those EULAs that you sign in many cases online. So interestingly, it's the states that have control over general business law and contracts like EULAs. And at least 17 states, and that may be more now, that might have been outdated information, have had some type of right to repair law under consideration. So at the congressional level, apparently Congress has control over what's called anti-circumvention law. So there may be some role there at the national level for action. So thank you for the opportunity to learn more about this issue. And I like to be able to fix my own stuff, and I look forward to working with the Farmers Union on this issue. So stay tuned.
All right, so Kim's going to ask our next question.
Thanks for all that information. That's very helpful. Yeah. Are schools having to make a sudden switch to distance learning, focus on our lack of rural broadband? On all the districts, broadband access stops just past the school, and most of our students don't have access to internet beyond the expensive hotspots, which are generally limited. Reliable connectivity also allows for telehealth access at a time when services are more critical than ever before. Farmers can use their smart ag programs more effectively to better plan and market their crops with fast connections. Despite all the noted needs and the benefits for it, creating widespread access to broadband seems to be just a dial-up speed. Creating widespread seed. We've heard for years that rural broadband is a priority, but little has happened to expand access, hurting our students as well as our abilities to use new technologies on our farms and ranches. What will you do to make rural broadband priorities a reality for all Montana families?
Thank you, and good to see you, Kim. It's been a while. It sure is an unfortunate aspect of the pandemic that we can't get together in person and see our friends. So, but at least we can see them on screen.
Yeah, this works.
Yeah, so I've long said that internet access is a key requirement for survival in rural Montana. It allows access to education, as you mentioned, telehealth, keeping in touch with family, remote employment, and just so much more. And the pandemic is only accentuating its importance in our lives and the divide between who has access and who doesn't. So we need both information and investment. We have to ensure broadband access is extended to unserved areas. One of the problems now is that we can't even get good maps of who's being served or not. I've been working on this issue since 2012 as a legislator, when I discovered the lack of mapping, that companies wouldn't share their information. And my community was trying to find out where additional service was needed. And we couldn't even figure out where it was. So there has been some work in Congress. A bipartisan bill was recently signed into law to make the mapping better. So that's a step. And then there's the needed investment. So when rural areas are 35% of the land mass, but 5% of the population, there's really a role for public dollars to help extend these services, just like rural electrification in the 1930s. And, if my opponent were on this call, he talks about broadband as well, but he talks about reducing right-of-way fees and things like that. And I think a really important question for him is what's the extent of your willingness to invest publicly in this infrastructure, which is exactly what it is. So I've worked on these issues here in Montana. I look forward to working with our 15 rural broadband providers in Montana, make the most efficient investments possible to bridge the digital divide and ensure rural Montana can be competitive in the world. So we've got to work on this.
So before you ask your next question, introduce yourself and what crops you and production that you do, so that Kathleen would be able to know. John, can you ask question 2 on postal? Okay, Jeff, go ahead.
Okay, and I'm going to ask this on behalf of my neighbor Alice, who is having trouble logging in this morning. They're from Guilford, Montana. They have a mixed operation, Simmental. They run Simmentals and raise a lot of diversified grains. So her question was going to be that many Farmers Union members have been negatively affected by the reduction in service at the USPS in the middle of a pandemic, when face-to-face options for doing business are even more limited than they normally are for us in rural Montana, and broadband access is in some cases lacking. We rely on consistent mail service for everything from medications to schoolwork packets from teachers to commodity contracts and checks from buyers. What do you think needs to be done to shore up the Postal Service in the immediate term and then in the longer term as well?
Yeah, so thanks for the question. And holy cow, we got a pandemic, and we've got hurricanes and forest fires, and then we find that there's concerns with the Postal Service. I mean, there's long been concerns with the Postal Service, but it just feels like one more crisis, especially when we're preparing to vote by much of it by mail. So we all know that the Postal Service is intended to serve the public. And reported changes are threats to that intent, as well as to rural states like Montana. So under some of those changes, which we understand some have been put on hold, but others have been implemented, we're losing our blue boxes here in my community. So under these changes, Montanans would have a harder time getting life-saving medicine, voting. As you guys mentioned, small businesses struggle to keep costs low so they can continue to grow. And families would pay more just to stay connected to loved ones. Part of the proposal is to have higher fees in rural areas. So that just seems crazy in a state like this. So we need to rein in the roughshod decision-making within the Postal Service that's occurring without transparency and without consultation with their Postal Regulatory Commission. I mean, that's why we have commissions like that, is to help make decisions. And there's no consultation with Congress either. So we need a thoughtful public process to determine how we keep this vital public service viable and effective. I commit in Congress to working to strengthen the Postal Service and defend it against hasty, dangerous decision-making, and that means keeping it public, revisiting this unusual requirement for them to pre-fund retiree healthcare benefits. That's incredibly expensive. And we need to plan for the resources that the Postal Service needs to continue to provide crucial services to people across the country. So it's going to take all of us putting pressure on elected officials to take action. I hope I'm going to be one of those officials come January. And we also need to really think about our own purchasing, and when we want to mail something or ship something, let's use the Postal Service. So we can all have an effect on this.
So we're going to jump ahead and let Laura ask the next question. You know, she's a rancher's wife, and as you know, ranchers' wives are multitasking, taking care of the kids and running the ranch. And so introduce yourself, Laura, and ask your question.
Oh, so good to see you, Kathleen. Laura Peterson, and Jess sends his best too. He's so we're both so excited about you and what you're doing, and how substantive you are here today as well. This one's a tough one with suicide rates increasing, and the fact that we talk about food policy and suicide policy together that's just wrong. And that's where we've come to with our net farm income and where we're at. So it's not just that, it's rural health services and other things. So just wondering, you know, how you see this issue and what we can do with government on it.
Yeah, so Laura, given the intro, I would say that all ranchers' wives are ranchers too. So, and we know.
Oh, I was going to take that up with Walt later.
Yeah. You know, when I 26 years ago, when I was looking to move to Montana, I was being interviewed by a woman actually, and I had been looking at jobs because I wanted to return to the Rockies. I'd been looking at jobs in Utah and Idaho, and one of the questions I asked her was, you know, I'm a single woman in my 30s. You know, how am I going to fit? Am I going to fit in there? And she told me all the wonderful stories about the legacy of strong women in Montana, including the ranch wives who managed everything when their husbands were in World War I, you know, when they were overseas, and Jeanette Rankin. And so anyway, so I have a strong respect and love for the role of women in Montana. So Laura, I'm helping you take on Walter after this with stories like that. So to the question though, yeah, you know, hearing, I think it was maybe 2 years ago when I went to the Farmers Union gathering in Kalispell, and hearing stories about people that were so devastated because they couldn't maintain the family legacy on the land, they were taking their own lives and still are, and it's just devastating. You know, how did we get to this place? When median farm income is negative $1,500 per year, and 70% of total farm income comes from secondary jobs, and 15 cents of the food dollar goes to farmers, we have a problem in this nation. We need to relieve stresses all around. We need to ensure farmers can make a living, both in the return they get, the choices they can make in their inputs, and the opportunities they have to sell their products. So we need to provide mental health resources and reduce the stigma of seeking them out. You know, I loved hearing that MSU Extension was working to provide mental health resources because they're one of the entities that's trusted in rural Montana, and what a great way to help fulfill a really difficult need. So we also need to foster telehealth and ensuring, as we just talked about, broadband access throughout Montana that's needed to use telehealth. We have to work to keep rural clinics and hospitals open and increase the availability of mental health providers. And then, you know, regarding the stress that's at the root of these problems, we've got to work to stabilize markets so that trade can be more predictable, and we've got to ensure access to affordable health care. We've got to compensate the healthcare providers for telehealth appointments. There's been some improvement there lately, and just so much more. As with our overall suicide rates among veterans and on our Indian reservations and in rural Montana, all are unacceptable statistics, and we have to change them. So I look forward to going to Congress and working on these really difficult issues and ensuring we solve them.
So I deserved that, Kathleen and Laura. Really, I'm a rancher's husband
There you go.
because I am on the road and my wife is taking care of the cattle, the farm and ranch. And I wouldn't be able to do this without her. And I appreciate that. And I was wrong.
Okay, Laura, touche, huh?
Yeah, you know, it's such a hard time right now. I'm just commenting, and another reason we need to send more women to Congress, just with the passing of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, that's a big factor in this healthcare question. And you know, rural access, when we moved out to Montana, on our healthcare changed dramatically. So
Yeah.
we're in the big city of Billings. So I think there's a lot we can do here, and look forward to your work on this.
Thank you. Thanks for all you do too, Laura and Jess.
Yeah.
You're up,
Yeah.
Jeff.
Hey, my name's Jeff Bangs. As you know, I actually make radio ads for a living and just do this on the side.
Thank you for that.
My question involves the trade wars and their huge impact on all of us as producers here in Montana. We had a fairly good framework in place to at least start from with the TPP, and that was blown up by this administration. Now we have a bilateral agreement with Japan that still gives advantage to places like Brazil and Australia due to their tariff schedules. The USMCA is allowing Canada to continue to dump wheat into our markets, especially here along the High Line, while we have varietal requirements to be able to access their markets. It's really not even close to being equitable. You know, why didn't we try to reinstate country of origin labeling when we were opening these up? Phase one with China was supposed to be our great savior, but it really has no enforcement, no teeth in it, and doesn't really agree, in our opinion anyway, to anything more than what they were already buying. So how would you as a member of Congress help us redevelop our market share that we've lost in these places, and how do we how can Congress help us to develop new markets as well?
Yeah, well, again, you know, the issues just pile on. We've got a pandemic. And during a pandemic, you know, who gains from that? It was big business and the processors. So producers need and deserve stable and predictable markets, and Montana and producers have worked to create those markets that are now at risk or have been lost. So Montana farmers and ranchers provide the best products in the world, no matter what other people try and say, and which isn't true, and deserve to be compensated for it. So, for example, Montana farmers worked for 50 years to develop a wheat strain attractive to Japan. And now, as you mentioned, we're losing market share to Canada and Australia. So once we lose that, it's really hard to get those markets back. I was calling foul as soon as the announcement of potential steel and aluminum tariffs occurred over 2 years ago. You know, one thing that's so frustrating about not being in office right now is you have to jump up and down on the sidelines, and I just can't wait to get into office so I can, you know, raise these issues and get things done about them. So our current representative back then, he wouldn't even sign a letter to the president expressing concern over these tariffs. And all that letter said was, you know, please be careful if you're getting into this tariff idea. And really the bigger issue is that over the last 40 years or so, Congress has really abdicated its authority over trade policy, and we need to take that back. One of the first questions I asked myself when I heard about the aluminum steel tariffs was, why does the president have authority over tariffs? It just seems like a policy issue that Congress should be involved with. And sure enough, you know, that gradually over these 40 years, Congress has handed over its authority to the executive. So in addition to those sort of general concerns, we need to enact country of origin labeling, cool, so that U.S. beef really is U.S. beef, not just beef processed in a U.S. plant that may come from Brazil, which there's been some health issues about Brazilian beef. And we need to do cool in a way that isn't cost prohibitive to the producer. So I think, you know, the concept of cool is so broadly accepted. We just need to figure out the way that that we can do it, that the cost to do it doesn't land solely on the producer. So, and I look forward to helping figure that out.
I was going to follow up with a question from our policy book about your feelings on fast track authority, but I think that's fairly clear.
So, Ben, go ahead.
Yeah, so back to your trade issues, kind of a side point. You mentioned the problems with the processors in the U.S., the packers and whatnot. And one of the more disconcerting things that's happened recently is JBS's acquisition of Mountain States Rosen lamb processing plant. That plant represented 20% of the lamb processing capacity in the U.S., and that's the second largest plant in the U.S. JBS, the one that bought the plant, Mountain States Rosen was a co-op, by the way, that bought the plant, is the largest importer of lamb protein into the United States. So to me, this is like very obviously a blatant attempt by a foreign entity to eliminate competition from a domestic competitor in the lamb market. This is bad. I mean, this is really bad. My lamb prices within a week of when that happened, the prices for my lamb dropped 20%. You know, lost 20% of the supply, 20% of my price goes away. So yeah, why not? And basically, what's happened out of Congress or anybody else right now is half of Congress is what? Huh? I don't know. And the other half of Congress, oh, we wrote a letter. I'm kind of sick and tired of the, oh, we wrote a letter thing, especially from your hopefully predecessor and his former business cohort, because that seems to be the only thing they ever know how to actually do. Right. What would you be willing to do to make this stop? Because the other response we get is, oh, be patient. We got to wait for the investigation to finish, whether it's USDA or Justice Department. I'm sorry, at the rate they're going, I will not only be out of the lamb business, I might possibly be dead before they'll actually do anything with these investigations.
Well, right. I mean, this is a huge concern. And yeah, you know, writing a letter is one thing, but you got to deliver it personally. You got to plant yourself at that agency's director's office, and you got to call people on the carpet about, you know, we need to get things done. And then you got to propose legislation or hold their budgets hostage until you get some response. So what's incredibly frustrating is if there's laws on the books that just aren't being enforced, right? So we need to enforce antitrust requirements. I had a really interesting conversation with a policymaker about how doing that actually is good for the economy. It creates more business opportunities, and you know, the Packers and Stockyards Act was passed in 1921 when people were concerned that there were only 5 processors in the industry then, and now there's 4, right? So it's just, again, you know, jumping up and down on the sidelines is so frustrating. I'm looking forward to getting in and really getting things done about this and being able to report results to you guys and having you come with me and in Washington and making sure that these issues are known. I'm also, and part of this is, you know, I'm one voice in 435, or will be, in Congress. We really need to, you know, the Senate is one place where the West is better represented. And so we need to make sure that we're working in both houses to make these changes. So, and then beyond the legislation part, I'm interested in whether and this was a question I asked of someone when I was talking about this issue, and whether processing facilities can be modified to process multiple products, whether whether the economy or other types of incentives might be in place to have beef processing be able to be lamb processing as well. So we need to further develop our local and regional processing systems in general, right? We need, and our markets. So from what I've heard, we need more inspectors, we need more training of processors, and Jess Peterson told me that that there's actually a training program being developed at Miles College for processing, which is great. And we need to foster more businesses in this sector. I keep talking about coming out of this pandemic stronger on the other side, and we've got to, I'm really good at finding silver linings in some very dark places. But if we can develop more regional markets, local and regional markets, and get consumers to demand local products, maybe this pandemic will have some type of silver lining that we can encourage to stay strong in the future. So I've been an advocate for local food all of my policy career, and I'm gonna keep doing that in Congress.
Thank you. I want to follow up on that here. Mountain States Rosin was a cooperative that was a plant that they bought from JBS. JBS wanted out of the lamb business because of decreased domestic demand for lamb. Well, we've had increased domestic demand since then, and Mountain States Rosin was a very viable business until COVID and their obvious inability to move products. So, yeah, and then it's a foreign acquisition. So who allowed that to happen? Because that has to go through somebody. And why wasn't there oversight?
So, John, you want to ask your question?
Yep. So I'm John Wicks. I'm from Ledger, Montana. Just finished converting a family farm to all organic production. I produce grains, pulses, and some oil seeds. And the question was, I was wondering if you could please share your experience working with farmers, ranchers, in rural communities.
Sure. And so, as I mentioned, I've got a 37-year career working in natural resources with a specialty in water. And so I spent a lot of that working statewide and working across the West. So a lot of that has been with farmers and ranchers. I've worked to diversify incomes, bring young people back to the land, address predator issues, protect senior water rights, tell the story of good work going on the land through a film program that I developed. And I know when you're riding shotgun in the truck, it's your job to open and close the gates. And I'm really proud that I've figured out how to do that and not get my hair caught in the top wire. So it's just been such a treat and an honor to work with folks, the stewards of the land. And part of that was being a statewide water program manager here in Montana. Working to find win-win solutions to, improve irrigation efficiency where it was appropriate hydrogeologically, and help irrigators while we were, rewatering streams and keeping fish species off the endangered species list, which is also really helpful to producers to not have to worry about that. And then my last job before going campaigning full time was working with a group called the Western Landowners Alliance, which is an organization of farmers and ranchers across the West. And that's where we were working to help people stay on the land, find creative ways to do value added and diversify their incomes, work with the the Young Farmers Coalition to figure out, how we can have succession and allow young people to break through barriers and who want to farm. They want to raise food and get them onto the land, and just so many issues. That's where the film program started, because so many farmers and ranchers that I talked to told me that that they don't think people in urban areas or consumers of their products really know that they're taking good care of the land. And so we started a program that with a partnership with Montana State University graduate program in film, to send an intern every semester to one of our member farms and ranches to do a profile on that operation and those farmer ranchers. And I think that program changed every single intern's life. And we got some great films about just poignant stories about these wonderful land stewards. So there are all kinds of issues. We worked hard on predator issues and trying to figure that out. And I just so look forward to continuing to work with rural Montana and the West and rural America to figure out some of these problems. And one of the challenges in the U.S. House is, except for the really populated states in the West, because there's low population levels, we gotta stand together and stand strong for the West and make sure that the programs like the Farm Bill work for the West, and often they don't. And so I think my knowledge of the Farm Bill, there's going to be another one coming down the pike that we got to work on as soon as I get there. That's going to help, and my commitment to rural Montana and our farming and ranching communities. We haven't seen that in a long time. We've seen political climbers and not folks that are there to really do right by Montana.
Thank you.
So, Eric, are you able to ask your question? You've got good enough service on Cool?
It's not great right now. I'm out in pasture, so.
Oh, go ahead, Ben, then why don't you ask the question, Ben?
Okay, you've kind of talked about this before, but country of origin labeling, obviously when we had it, we got obvious increase in price and did much better. Tester signature bill for the time, and then once the WTO threatened us, we as a country chickened out. What would you be willing to do to get that back on the table and keep us from chickening out next time?
I agree. Yeah. So consumers deserve and want to know where their food comes from. There's all kinds of movements that are in response to that. Montana produces some of the highest quality food products in the world. And as we've talked about already, it's misleading to label Brazilian beef, which again was banned for health concerns in the past, as US beef just because it's processed here. So the packers, as we all know, are increasingly foreign owned, likely incentivizing foreign beef to flood the markets labeled as US beef. So the US government has a responsibility for truth in labeling, and this practice is knowingly misleading Americans and potentially putting their health at risk. So we need comprehensive country of origin labeling to be the law of the land. I think we didn't fight hard enough at WTO. I looked at some of the history there, and we need to try a little harder and make it happen. So and then we have to, I want to look back on the 2013 legislation and figure out, how the cost was allocated. We need to make sure that the cost isn't all borne by producers, when you guys are certainly suffering under increased costs already, and low returns. So yeah, I'm all over that, and it's great to hear Tester talking about it again. I think Bullock is talking about it as well. So with the three of us in office, I think you'll certainly see some action from the Montana delegation.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to that. Jan Tusick, are you able to ask your question, or you got good coverage?
Yes, yes. Well, good morning, Kathleen. I apologize for you not being able to see me because my camera for some reason doesn't want to work, but I can see you and it's a real pleasure. So thank you for taking your time with us this morning. My question will surprise, because I know you are familiar with the work that I do at Mission Mountain Food Enterprise Center and some of the work that we've done together through Grow Montana, the cottage food law that you so effectively move forward. I think we are concerned, and this pandemic definitely rolled back and exposed how our food system is broken. And with that, and you did touch upon the Farm Bill, and so I would like you to speak about how you will be an advocate, which I know you will be, but how we might get creative on bolstering resources that exist in the Farm Bill when it comes up that support SNAP, support food access for people in need, because that became very apparent that we have shortages there during this pandemic. And also those great programs that support local food system development, which we have a robust network in the state of Montana that are looking at expanding to the next level. And we'll be looking to you as our representative to help us do that.
Yeah, so the Farm Bill, let's see, it was 2018. So yeah, when I get there, we'll be starting work on the next Farm Bill. And, you know, I worked on trying to get the Farm Bill last time to work better for the West. You know, there's provisions in there that you can tell are just written for cotton and peanuts and you know, things that really don't help us as much here in the West. So, you know, the first step to ensuring that we have a Farm Bill that works for us is sending someone there that knows the Farm Bill and cares about it, and that would be me. And so there, what we need, and my style, as you know, Jan, when I was doing the cottage food bill, is to convene, you know, broad task forces or whatever we want to call them to really have a comprehensive look at what's working and what isn't working in the current Farm Bill, so that we can boil down, you know, the priorities for what the next Farm Bill should look like and what we need to fix and retain. So you can count on me to be very active. You know, my husband was NRCS, so I was an NRCS wife his entire career, Natural Resource Conservation Service, so we were fairly close to the state conservationist here, Dave White, who is now back in the DC area, and he was very involved in Farm Bill legislation, and I've already told him, you know, I so look forward working with you on the next Farm Bill, and so I'm going to mobilize as many experts as possible to really give me early the priorities that I'm going to take and fight for the next Farm Bill. So I hope that answered your question.
Yes, thank you very much.
Yeah.
So Alice, introduce yourself and your farm.
So, apparently broadband only works if you know how to get on. Good morning. Sorry for the confusion earlier. Thanks for being with us. I just, like Jeff was saying earlier, we farm in Guilford. We have pulses, wheat, we run cementals, we have hay, we also grow flax, something we started just a couple years ago to try and actually make some money instead of on winter meat. I want to kind of piggyback on Jan's question there and ask you about cooperatives. In challenging times, farming families have often turned to cooperative solutions to solve problems. The pandemic has obviously increased the importance of working together for things like processing, distribution, and marketing supply needs. New product and market potential such as hemp products are emerging. Meat producers are discussing how they can organize cooperatives to meet their processing needs. Will you support USDA rural development in expanding cooperative development opportunities? And what new capital opportunities might be launched to move new value-added ventures forward that are organizing as cooperatives?
So thanks for the question. And I do need to learn more. Well, I need to learn more about a lot of things, and I openly admit that. So I need to learn more about cooperatives and how I foster them. But I'm looking forward to working on all kinds of projects with USDA rural development. I'm a fan and advocate for anything value added. We need to keep our resources and value here in Montana as long as possible, and benefit from multiple levels of value. As Jan mentioned, she mentioned the cottage food bill. So I had a blast passing that, and that was a bill that allowed certain non-hazardous foods to be produced in a home kitchen and sold. And so that bill itself created over 200 new businesses and over 3,000 new Montana products. And as I mentioned, those products most of them are using Montana ag products as inputs. And so that's exactly value added that I'm especially interested in. And just to illustrate further kind of how I think and how I hope you can rely on my word to work on cooperatives and more value added ventures is a story about there's a farmer up in Brady who at a gathering at a coffee shop I think it was in Conrad, he very quietly, very, very proud man, said his issue when I was asking people what they cared about. His issue was that he was sacrificing food and utilities to try and pay for his insulin. And that you could hear a pin drop in that room, and that's just so wrong, right? So some might think, okay, well, they would jump to regulation. Well, my first thought was, how do you make insulin? Could we make insulin in Montana? And I started researching it, and sure enough, the patents have expired, and so there's no issues there, but there is a monopoly on the synthesis of standard insulin that our Montanans and Americans buy every day or use every day. But I looked a little further, and I found this company in Canada that had figured out how to grow safflower that could produce insulin, and they were calling it prairie insulin. And I thought that was fascinating. And if you can grow it in Saskatchewan, you ought to be able to grow it in Montana. And so I started talking to ag-related venture capitalists about this idea of, and this prairie insulin could be grown, harvested, and produced for less than commercial insulin. And this was probably 7 or 8 years ago. This information was actually a bit dated, and so even more competitive now, I would assume, since insulin has increased in price. So that is an illustration of how I approach things. It's like, well, how can we solve that problem here? Just like repairing our own stuff, right? How do we solve that problem here? It turns out that company, China, tried to buy their technology. They said no, and I haven't seen anything about them since. So I'm going to keep talking about prairie insulin. I'm going to talk about it to our researchers, and I'm going to continue to talk about it with our with venture capitalists and see if we can figure out if that's an opportunity for Montana. So whether it's cooperatives or more value added, or trying to figure out if we can, get a ripple plant here to have value added for our pulses, and not call it milk. I'm all over it. So just feed me those ideas and I'll run with them.
Thanks for that approach.
It's really interesting. I'm looking forward to prairie insulin.
Yeah.
First time I heard about that, Kathleen. Thank you.
That's why I keep talking about it, is we gotta figure it out. So, and maybe there's issues with it. I don't know. Maybe there was a whole GMO, backlash or something, but you can't reject something until you've pursued it all the way to the end. And I'm going to keep talking about it. So.
John?
Yep. So Montana farmers have few buyers to call when selling our production, and their prices and contracts are almost always the same. The U.S. government has shown no interest in investigating or regulating these anti-competitive actions. The current commodity loan rate is so low that it became a useless tool when trying to force these companies to pay farmers a fair price for their products. One thing I've seen on the organic side is large companies getting into organic commodities. They've been dropping their bids based on the conventional market rather than what millers are paying or on demand. What will you do to ensure Montana producers have a fair price and competitive market to sell their products?
Well, so I think we're going to repeat some of the themes here, but as we've talked about, we need to not only investigate antitrust activities, but take action. I am not going to be in this seat and treat it like on the job training. I'm going to go there and hit the ground running. And this is one of the issues that I want to pursue. So Montana producers are getting a raw deal, and processors are reaping major profits, and in a national crisis, no less. So this is wrong. We need leadership in Congress to do something about it, and we just haven't had that. We haven't had people who cared enough or knew what to do to get things done. And one of the biggest honors in my lifetime was an award when I left that state water program manager job, where I got this plaque, and on the plaque it said, Montana's rivers and something like Montana's rivers and outdoors are better for your work because you cared. And then it went on and it said, and you knew what to do. And to me, it was that you knew what to do that meant so much. And that's what we need in Congress, is people that have been around long enough, whether it was on the private sector side, analyzing what policy changes needed to happen for the private sector, whether it was the nonprofit side, really trying to advance change for producers, whether it's on the public side, trying to deliver services and solve problems on the ground. 37 years of that means that not only do I care, but I know what to do. And that's what we need in Congress, is we need folks both that care, but that know what to do. That's more than a letter.
Yes. So Jeff, you're up.
Yeah, Kathleen, before I ask this, I just wanted to take the opportunity here to thank you for your engagement with this organization the last few years as you've gone around the state and traveled and campaigned. It means a lot to us that you're willing to engage with us on these issues. And for me personally, it's been fun to work with you and get to, I look forward to it when you're in Congress and continuing this conversation, because it's been valuable, I hope, for you and certainly for us.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what I'd like to ask you about is biofuels. It's a sector that's been hit particularly hard by this pandemic. they've become vitally important to the farm economy, and we see it as vitally important, specific to Montana in the future once this technology for cellulosic biofuels comes online a little more. I think the possibilities are almost endless for what biofuels could do in Montana. As you know, they play a critical role in making fuel burn cleaner, leading to cleaner air. They also help us, of course, to reduce our dependence on foreign sources of energy. Lately, we've seen waivers for small refineries that have dramatically undercut the RFS. I think this industry could be in trouble without some specific concrete steps from Congress. How do you see that playing out? What will you do to support the biofuel industry, both the existing biofuel industry and helping to get cellulosic next-gen biofuels off the ground?
Yeah, so one of the things I love about policy is just the diversity of things you get to learn about and figure out. So I'm all about giving consumers more choices and producers more markets. I've been learning more about biofuels lately. Thank you, Walter, and look forward to continuing that. I want to make sure that those fuels are truly sustainable and don't compete with food production. And I really look forward to working with the Farmers Union and researchers and industry to be creative for agriculture and our environment. You know, there's fascinating breakthroughs coming forward, whether it's, you know, algae producing fuel or wood waste. There's really just fascinating, innovative approaches to generating fuel in ways that reduce waste, that provide good economic opportunities, that help. Again, I'm always looking for helping diversify the incomes and opportunities for folks on the land. I have a lot to learn, and I'm interested in doing so. So I know you guys are going to be helpful in me doing that.
So this next question was going to be from Eric Sommerfeld, who we almost lost last year to health issues.
Oh.
And he's right now out helping a cow calve. So he wasn't able to be here. But we have all heard stories in rural Montana of unaffordable health care. Insurance that is unaffordable. Doctor and hospital cause delays in health care. Prescription drugs are often too expensive to purchase. Rural families are choosing between paying the rent and health care. One injury can mean the end for a family farm, and lack of affordable health and reliable health insurance is very big deal. While there are some mental health services available in Montana, many producers are in crisis and are even contemplating suicide. Rural Montana offers limited options for help. What is your plan to address these issues?
Well, you know, as I travel Montana and ask people what rises to the top for you, you know, what are your priorities? It's healthcare. Healthcare is the broadest, deepest, most urgent issue across Montana. And my style of campaigning and being a public servant is being rooted in the hopes, struggles, and dreams of Montanans. And one of the biggest struggles is healthcare from a whole variety of directions, and you mentioned quite a few of them. So healthcare is personal for me. I think many of you know that when I was 11, my mother was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's, and my father and I became her caregivers for 8 years until she died. So I know what a healthcare crisis can do to a family. My career's been in natural resources and water, but in the legislature, once again, it was healthcare that I was working on lots of things, but one of my bills I'm most proud of was one that it was about life and death. It was forcing insurance companies to stop denying routine cancer care to cancer patients. And that took me 4 years to pass, but I got it through, and it's literally saving lives. So I worked on surprise medical bills. A patient shouldn't get a bill for $40,000 just because somebody decided that an out-of-network provider was going to be involved in their care. And so I worked on that. And, that's something that Congress is just now getting wind of. And I was working on it in 2013. So also trying to reduce discrimination in the individual market. We've got all these protections in Montana against discrimination in the group insurance market, but not in the individual one. So I was working on that. So I'm going to continue working on healthcare issues and take that expertise to Congress. For those that want to get into the weeds on this, my healthcare platform is on the website, KathleenForMontana.com. But I'll mention a few pieces of it. One is that we need to allow people 55 and older to buy into Medicare. That would reduce the costs in the Medicare pool. It'll also reduce the costs in the individual market. We have people that are trying to pay $1,900 a month with a $9,000 deductible. That is not insurance. That is indenturement, right? That's bankruptcy. That's a third job. And it's unacceptable. So another aspect, we need to allow Medicare to bargain for drug prices. The VA and Medicaid can do that now, but a deal made with pharma prohibited Medicare from doing it. Well, we should do that, and that will save an estimated $11 billion a year that we can use to pay down the debt and improve other aspects of our healthcare system, and including the fact that Congress reneged on a commitment in the Affordable Care Act to help people like in that $1,900 range that are at this place called the subsidy cliff, that need help paying their premiums. We need to fix the healthcare system as a whole. We have a patchwork of a system that's too expensive and too inefficient. Mental health needs to be always considered as part of healthcare when we talk about healthcare. People keep asking me, well, what about mental health? And it just surprises me to have to clarify that mental health is healthcare. We need to ensure that the community health center funds are funded in the long run, not used as political footballs. Those are what fund rural health clinics, or in part. The CHIP program, that gets used as the Children's Health Insurance Program, that gets used as a political football as well. And that shouldn't happen. So, and then, we need to have a conversation in this nation about, fee for outcome instead of fee for service. Integrated healthcare programs like PACE, which is a program where that will allow expenditures from Medicaid and Medicare, I think, to help people stay in their homes longer, to stay independent. That's how you stay healthy, is to stay independent. So again, I don't want to get too far into the weeds, but just know that I am committed to solving this patchwork of a healthcare system we've got that doesn't work for so many Americans, making sure we keep the choices we have in private insurance if folks want that, but also repair the system as a whole.
Kathleen, like so many farmers, I wouldn't have health insurance because I have a pre-existing condition if it wasn't for ACA.
Yeah.
And I'm a little worried because your opponent wouldn't come to talk to us. But I hear that he wants to repeal ACA. Absolutely. And I don't know what the hell I'd do if that happens.
Yeah, he has said that he wants to repeal every word. I did a debate with him night before last, and he said it again. He wanted a clean slate, whatever that means, at the federal level. We don't have time wipe the slate clean and deliberate. Well, if Congress even did deliberate, which they don't, and they need to craft something that's the replacement. Again, we need people that are experienced enough in policy to know that you don't throw the baby and the bathwater out and then turn the tap back on and figure out, what you're going to do with it. It's crazy. So let's send someone there that knows what they're doing and isn't just spouting the talking points of far right think tanks.
Well, I really appreciate your time and willingness once again to come visit with Montana Farmers Union. You've been a regular at our conventions. I appreciate that. And, we all look forward to working with you in Congress.
I do too. And thank you guys for your time and for all you do. And let's get across this finish line and get to work.